Hello, I'm Sherry Sturman, Director of Crayola Education. We're excited that Penguin Kids and Penguin Classroom are collaborating with Crayola on this Art of Learning program. Art helps children learn about themselves and others. Today, we're going to explore what we can learn from baseball and two incredible Native American baseball players, just in time for the Major League Baseball playoffs and right before Native American Heritage Month begins. So gather your friends, your students, and your family. Grab some art supplies and get ready for a hands-on learning session. I'm thrilled to introduce author Traci Sorell and illustrator Arigon Starr, the duo who created Contenders, two Native baseball players, one World Series. Welcome, Traci and Arigon.
CO.
Traci, you grew up in the Cherokee Nation tribe's reservation in Oklahoma, then moved to Southern California as a teenager. How did that move and others throughout your life shape your career and influence your writing?
Well, I'm sure that many of you watching have had a move in your life, and sometimes you're very excited about those moves, and other times you might be apprehensive. And I had a mixture of both of those feelings. When my family moved to San Diego from here, I was super excited to live near the beach. But what was difficult about it was that no one understood who the Cherokee people were. So my family, my friends, other tribes of kids that I had grown up around, the Shawnee in Delaware, they had no idea. They didn't even know the Native nations that were there within the San Diego area, or let alone the rest of California. So it was very isolating for me to not have other people besides my family to talk about that. But it wasn't until I went to college that I got to meet a lot of other Native students. And I was a Native American Studies major, and I was the first person in my family to go. But that was its own adjustment because that was the first time I'd ever lived in a city. I moved up to the San Francisco Bay Area to go to college. While I was there, many students were going abroad and studying in another country for a year. And I thought, oh, I want to do that. I've never been to another country besides just going across the border into Mexico. And so I went to Spain. But guess what? The year that I went to Spain was the year that they were celebrating the 500th anniversary of Christopher Columbus coming to this continent and saying he discovered Native people, which we all know you can't discover people or lands that have always been there, right? So that was a very difficult experience at times too. It was wonderful to be speaking Spanish and seeing how different people lived in another part of the world. And there was a big emphasis on family, which was very much like how I had grown up, and people were very close with their parents and aunts and uncles and larger community. But there also, again, was this erasure, this invisibility of Native people. And so that is something that I've found almost every time I've moved anywhere, is that there's just a lot of misinformation and invisibility about Native people and Native nations all across the United States and even around the world, because there are Indigenous peoples everywhere. And a lot of times people just don't understand because they don't have lessons in schools. And the story that Arigon and I have crafted really comes out of wanting to share a story that everybody should know about.
I love your emphasis on making the invisible visible and feeling that connection as you bring forward the stories. And you have an amazing number of talents, including being a singer, actor, playwright, comic book writer, one-woman show performer, and artist. How have these many roles informed your work as a children's book illustrator?
Well, one thing I like to tell folks about all of the things that I do is I was blessed with talent. My parents nurtured everything I wanted to do. If I wanted to draw, if I wanted to paint, if I wanted a guitar, if I wanted to act or write or record my own little, dramas on a cassette player, my parents were like, okay, all right, we'll help you out. Because of that nurturing and that belief that there are no limits on what we can do, that's how all this came to be. But I always tell people also that the through line of all of my artistic talents is storytelling. And I think it's so important to have another story out there than the mainstream narrative and the stereotypes that we've all put up with since we were children. That's our job. That's my job. Bust the walls down and provide alternatives to the mainstream narrative. And I am so happy to be able to infuse the work with a lot of humor and a lot of stories that people aren't talking about, like this one here. People aren't talking about natives in baseball, but they should be.
I love your emphasis on parents nurturing and supporting. At Crayola, we say it's very important for parents to nurture creatively alive kids. And certainly your parents have established that foundation. You've become this master storyteller who really has found so many art forms, so many ways of sharing narratives. Thank you. Traci, you're a prolific author who has written many nonfiction books and fiction works, most that help children understand the history and the culture of Native Americans. Please tell us about your intentional focus on incorporating culturally accurate information about Cherokee and other Indigenous people in your writing, and why you chose to focus on 2 baseball players in this book.
What I noticed was that young people today, and this is, about 10 years ago when I first started thinking about writing for young people, is like, why aren't there more books? I didn't have those things as a child. And so I thought, why hasn't anything changed? Why are young people today not having all of these stories that we grew up hearing in our community? As Arigon talked about natives in baseball, why aren't there books about all of these people? They've been playing for well over 100 years. And so it's really to help our native kids and their non-native peers to say, hey, we've always been here. We are making contributions on all kinds of fronts. And there's amazing things that have happened that you should know about. Plus, as Arigon says, we're great storytellers. I grew up in a family that loved to tell stories. So I want to write from those who are birth to teens because I like to read all of those things. It fuels the child in me, but it also, I hope, inspires young people to share their own stories. And maybe that's through a song like Arigon does. Maybe that's through a comic or a graphic novel. We have so many stories, so much richness to share. And I always tell young people who love to draw or like to do a lot of different artistic things, like, don't stop doing that. Keep practicing. It's important. When you look at both of these native baseball players, neither one of them in how they grew up, and we'll talk a little bit more about that in a minute, would you think, oh, they would go on to play in the major leagues. But just because someone doesn't think you can do something, or they say, oh, well, this isn't the path we see for you, that doesn't mean you can't do it. There are so many things that we are capable of, and it's exciting. And I want young people to be not just encouraged, but really allowed to feel like their dreams are important, because they are. As Arigon said, sometimes our families are those encouragers. Sometimes it's our teachers at school or our librarian or someone else in the community. There's many, many people that can help us. And for me, one of those was books. Books gave me the ability to go, wow, there's lots of people who are living really different lives than I am. And this is exciting. And I want to know more about these people. I want to know more about different places.
Love the way you describe books as empowering kids to bring their dreams to life. Traci, you have whet our appetite to hear this story. Please read a few sections from the book and start by telling us about Charlie's life, adding some commentary about the challenges that he faced, as well as his personal strengths.
These 2 ball players are just amazing men, and they had some similarities in their childhoods and some real differences. So I'm going to start by sharing about Charles Bender's life. And one of the things that I bet some of you have nicknames that your family calls you. And so in the book, I include both of the nicknames that these ball players went by, because that's important to know, like, what you were called when you were younger. And then as we grow up, sometimes we don't have those nicknames anymore. So you'll hear that in both that I'm going to share. But this is a little bit about Charles. Charles Albert Bender, Al to his family, grew up on the White Earth Reservation in northwestern Minnesota. His Ojibwe mother and German-American father struggled to care for their large family. At age 7, Al endured a long train ride with his 2 siblings and a few other Ojibwe children. The kids arrived at a year-round Indian boarding school in Philadelphia, Pennsylvania. Funded in part by the Federal Indian Department, and run by the Episcopal Church. School life was strict, even abusive. Boys studied the Bible and performed manual labor like painting, installing windows, and farming. During this time, which is really from the 1800s to the even mid 1950s or so, boarding schools were the way that majority of Native children were educated. They were taken from their families and put in what amounts to an institution. They didn't have parents and family around. And so that's what happens to Charles. But he does have a bright spot, is that he learns the game of baseball watching the older boys play. And he even has a brief moment where he thinks he's going to be a catcher. And then a ball hits him between the eyes, and he's like, maybe I just need to be the one throwing these things. I'll share just a little bit about what happens during his teenage years. He finally returns to the White Earth Reservation from the boarding school at age 12, but life at home was still difficult and his father abusive. So Alan, one of his older brothers, ran away. That summer, they worked at another White Earth farm until a teacher from Carlisle Indian Industrial School visited, looking for boys. Al and his brother volunteered to go, so he ended up back in Pennsylvania. Once again, Al had regular food, clothing, and shelter, but no Ojibwe community to nurture him and his cultural identity. Like the school in Philadelphia, Carlisle also forced Native children to assimilate and adopt the culture and Christian religion of white people. Founded by U.S. Army Colonel Richard Pratt, the school followed a strict military routine and schedule, which Al noticed right away. In the little free time he was allowed each afternoon, he enjoyed playing baseball with the other boys. Although he didn't see it at first, Carlisle's coach, Pop Warner, eventually recognized Al's tenacity, character, and competitive spirit when the young man pitched. Al then made the team and won his first game. So when it says, Al volunteered, think what he's faced with at home, right? It's very difficult conditions. And so, but he goes with his older brother to a different boarding school, this one run by, as it says, a former military colonel. And it's a much stricter environment. But he's able to get on the baseball team and spend more time playing baseball than doing all the chores, which he very much loved. Shortly after he finishes there, he is able to go on to the majors because he is such an exceptional pitcher. And why is that? Because he spends time, he has wonderful eyesight and concentration and just the ability to kind of block everything out. But he also spends hours and hours perfecting throwing the ball and getting it straight to the catcher's mitt. And so that's really one of the things that Arigon and I have to work at, right? Is how do we craft that story? She never takes the first sketch and turns that in for the book. I never get to write down my first idea and turn that in for the book. All of these things take time and effort. And that's what you see with Charles, that he really is working on his game and how he's going to create pitches. And he actually invents the slider pitch. And we still use that in baseball today. So he's just an amazing, amazing person.
Great insights about his childhood. And I love the way you bring it forward to the importance of us all practicing in order to refine our craft and get the skills. Now let's hear about John, sometimes called Jack, his childhood and the challenges he faced, as well as his strengths.
John Tortismeyer's family and friends had a nickname for him too, Jack. He learned how to play baseball on his Cahuilla tribe's reservation in Southern California. Like Al, Jack had a German-American father, but he died when Jack was 7. His Cahuilla mother, a skilled basket maker, worked as a hotel cook in nearby Riverside to support her children. Despite the pressure during that time to adopt white people's norms, Jack spoke the Cahuilla language and stayed close to his family and culture. And so, of course, losing his father at such a young age makes him have to go to work sooner, but he still enjoyed playing baseball with his brother in Riverside and out on the reservation in his community. So unlike Al or Charles, he was able to grow up with his family, even though they were, like Charles's family, very impoverished. He has quite the different journey, though, to the major leagues. And that's another thing, too, is that I think it's important to note not everyone ends up in the same place the same way. So both of these men make it to the major leagues, but listen to Jack's story and how he gets to the majors, because it's very different from Charles's. After leaving school, Jack, now usually called John, worked for the Santa Fe Railroad and played on the company's baseball team. When the railroad workers went on strike, John headed out on the road. He played baseball on semi-pro teams in Southern California and across the Southwest. At a tournament in Albuquerque, New Mexico, a player on the opposing team became impressed with John's skills and size. He helped recruit John to play for Dartmouth College in football and baseball. At 5 feet 11 and 194 pounds, John looked like a football player and yet had no interest in the game. He played baseball for one season there before the college found out he didn't have a high school diploma. When Dartmouth let John go, he moved on to the minor leagues where he competed on 4 different teams. So Charles goes straight from the boarding school. He's briefly at Dickinson College, and then he's off to the majors. Whereas John is playing on a company team, then he's playing in a bunch of minor league teams. He's off at Dartmouth briefly, and then he gets to go to the majors. So there's no one path that gets us anywhere in life. We can all get there through many, many different ways.
Love that. So many paths can lead us to our dreams of success. A very important part of the book, please read about the first time that John and Charles met and explains what happened in that pinnacle game. And you've got some very important information in the author's notes of the book that explains how they played against each other in this 1913 World Series, as well as how they wrapped up their careers.
In 1911, the press had dubbed this the Indian versus Indian World Series. So people were very excited all around the world for this game because they loved baseball and they were hearing it on the radio. People are waiting to hear on telegraph what's happening. But because it was the first time that each team had a native baseball player on it, the press wanted to have them meet on the field. So this says World Series action, friends face off. Just before the first game of the World Series in 1911, John poses on the field with Charles, whom he describes as one of the nicest people you'd ever meet. The New York Times, which is a newspaper, prints this line: "Maybe they wish they had tomahawks in their hands instead of a bat and baseball." At the height of their careers, Charles and John can't escape the racism that infests even one of the country's leading newspapers. Can you imagine being at the biggest game of your life, and this is how people are writing about you? They can't even show up and be the professional baseball players that they are. And they didn't just have this happen in the newspaper. Oftentimes there were fans in the stands. There were people on opposing teams, sometimes people on their own teams that would come on who were not accepting of them being native baseball players. So both of these men were friends in real life, as they were with other native baseball players at the time, many who had come out of the boarding school system, and they just wanted to play in the World Series, right? Who wouldn't after all that work and you make that accomplishment? They go on to play each other again in 1913. So Charles Bender plays in 5 more World Series. They win 3. John Myers plays in 3 more. His team never wins any, but he leads his team in batting in addition to being an exceptional catcher. He leads his team in batting for 3 years, from 1911, 1912, and 1913, and he's 3rd in the overall National League. And like I say, Charles Bender goes on to be inducted into the National Baseball Hall of Fame, and he invents the slider pitch, which if you're a baseball fan or you've even watched baseball, you know we still use the slider pitch today in the game. So this is a fundamental part of the game that has been contributed by a native baseball player. And why don't more people know that? I love, love, love how at the end of the book, Arigon in her beautiful art, which you'll see throughout the book, shares so many of the baseball players who've come after them. And guess what? We still have native baseball players playing in Major League Baseball today. So you can find a number of them who are right-handed pitchers, just like Bender. And I talk about that in the timeline. as well. As we talked about, this is a nonfiction book, so all of this is real. There's also sources in the back. You are welcome to look up anything I've quoted, any of those sources, and read for yourself what was said in the newspaper and what was said in the various sources. There's many, many wonderful Native baseball players in addition to Charles and John that you should learn about.
You're both such great storytellers. Thank you for reminding us. It's fascinating and it's all true. I'm excited about our first hands-on art demonstration that's called Friends Face Off. Arigon, your illustrations are visually rich, showing history in personally compelling ways. One of the most important scenes in the book, Traci just talked about, it shows these two players meeting for the first time. The illustration captures their friendly demeanor, even though the press printed a negative statement making them sound like warriors instead of athletes. Please show viewers how to draw these friendly players sharing their respectful greeting.
Certainly, it is my pleasure, as always, to be part of this beautiful demonstration of these wonderful products. First, I want to just rave a little bit about how the colors of the world has made me smile from ear to ear, from coast to coast. Looking towards our players here, this is Mr. Bender right here, who's with the Philadelphia Athletics pitching. Right here we have Mr. Myers, who is a catcher and a slugger for the New York Giants. This is a sort of a detail of the illustration in the book. So what you're seeing here is line art and other line art kind of set further back, so it looks further into the distance. Now, what you can do with your crayon products, now you could either do these fine colored pencils, which I am, again, like I can't even tell you how thrilled I am to have these, and then just kind of color in lines here and give Mr. Bender a little skin tone, being mindful of like, okay, he's probably got a little shadow under his hat, a little shadow under his nose. It's fun to think in 3D. I enjoy it. It's something that, it's like, oh, wow, you can create depth just by pressing this little pencil down just a little harder. And that's all you have to do. You can lightly color. It's so much fun. You can do a lot of different tones. And in fact, when I was growing up and I had beautiful pencil markers, like this is how I would do my art. I used to pencil it in and then ink over it and then just start coloring with these gray pencils. So let's kind of give him a blue-gray jacket, and we can do a little indication of color under his, it's like he's got some indentations here under the hat. And then we can even let's add some crayons to this, because multimedia is fun. And sometimes you want to take something crayon-ish to indicate more of a solid color. However, Crayola has got you covered, kids. Look at this. Oh, look at this pen. Look, deep almond. Who knew that there was such a thing? So you can go around and do in some darker bits there. And when you darken in things, it emphasizes them and brings them out just a little bit more. And you can be very precise with this color. And another fun product, and again, this is not real life. We can have fun with his outfit. Because honestly, kids, it's up to you what color you want these guys to be. These beautiful watercolor markers are just gorgeous. And you can cover a lot of area in one go. So again, thinking about the light source, kind of color in a little bit there, give them a little bit of depth there, and then indicate more shadows and light. And one thing I want to emphasize too, and I wish I could kind of zoom in on this part right here, is when you want to see a friendly exchange between people, these two people are making eye contact. And they're smiling and they're open. Yet, here are their hands tightly clasped, indicating that, yes, we may not have met each other before, but here we are today, and we are friends. And I love that. What we can do also with Mr. Myers is, again, let's do a little more indication for shadow under his hat. and under his chin, like this, just a touch, so you can kind of see what's happening. They were a lot of fun to draw. One thing that I really enjoyed too, working with Traci, is that I didn't have to do all of this photo research myself. I was able to work with her. She sent me a lot of reference photos because obviously these are real people, and I wanted to make sure that they look like who they were supposed to look like. So using these crayons, you can use different kind of hashtag marks here, kind of crosshatch, if you like, to create, again, more depth. Go back in and refine it a little bit using all of these different techniques. And these pencils with the markers, again, adds different tones. You can kind of fill in his color a little bit more, leave a little bit of shine on his cheekbones, color underneath there. And then you see him coming to life, which is fantastic. We can just play. We're just playing today, kids. So let's give him a blue bill on the top of his cap, little dot on the top. We can do something like that, which is great fun. Let's maybe do a little red, a little orange. Again, just to indicate that those are the shadows. It's so much fun to do this. I could play with this stuff all day long. And luckily for me, that's my job. So I am having a blast every day, always busy and always loving what I do. And I hope that that is something that you can find with your art. Either you can use it to relax, or you can use it to make a living if you like, and hopefully enjoy doing what you're doing. And let's go back to that crayon. Let's fill in that hat. Maybe he's got a blue hat today. Maybe he was just feeling that color. You can see how all the different techniques work together. And it's so much fun. I can't even tell you guys, this is, maybe you want to make this background even fade back even a little bit more by darkening it in if you like, or maybe there's some green grass down here on the floor, down here on the ground. Now these fellas played at a place that isn't there anymore. In New York, it's called Polo Grounds. You can just see the fun that can be had with these wonderful products.
Thank you so much for showing us how to use the mixed media to show shadows and light sources in a drawing. And I loved your comments about the facial expressions and body posture of this warm, friendly greeting, and how that speaks louder than the mean words that were in the press. Now for our second art demo, we're excited to see you demonstrate baseball cards. Now, collecting baseball cards is as much of a sport as the game itself. And you illustrate a few baseball cards throughout the book. These images remind us that we can learn about players from the past and the present from this special medium. Please demonstrate how viewers can create their own baseball cards, featuring anyone who has played the sport or who dreams of being a baseball player.
So for those who are creating baseball cards, I just have to show you this. This is Charles Bender's baseball card, and here is John Myers. I just had to share these cards with you because they even had baseball cards back in the 1910s when these guys played. So baseball cards have been around for a really long time, and they're super cool. I can't wait to see what you create.
Yes. Oh my goodness. Okay, so baseball cards can tell you so much about a team, about a person. You can find out where they were born, what year they were born, how tall they were, and then into the more detailed baseball statistics, which everybody loves. However, what I like about these is, being a graphic designer, is we usually have an oblong, and then within that oblong, you'll see basically a portrait. Like this one is a headshot of Moses Yellow Horse. Sometimes it's a player in motion. In fact, I think I've got another one I can show you as well. This is another picture, Allie Reynolds from the New York Yankees. He was a very popular and very well-loved player back in the mid-50s. Also Muskogee Creek, like me. So what you can do, these beautiful pen markers, and you can take this and add a little color to Allie Reynolds' name, which part of doing baseball cards is imagining what size the letters are going to be, how far apart the letters are, and again, what color they're going to be. That's part of your baseball card design, which is great. And using these paintbrush markers, you can quickly fill in color, which is great. So all of a sudden, you have got some color going on here for Mr. Reynolds. Okay, so his baseball card is colored in. Let's give him some blue sky behind him. All right. And we could even kind of puff this around and indicate that there might be some clouds behind him. Maybe it was a sunny day. We don't know. It's up to us to decide what is going to happen in this drawing. Again, this is line art from Contenders. And I was able to create several different kinds of baseball card looks based on historical photos. And as Traci Sorell mentions, we still have players playing today. Now, Mr. Reynolds played back in the 50s. However, we still have guys playing baseball Major League today. So you don't have to stay stuck in the past. You know, Native people, we keep moving. That was one thing that I did with my family, is that we would travel and try to see how many ballparks we could go to. And I'm hoping that that is something that you can enjoy with your family as well, to go see these players live. Okay, so now we've given him a sky using the marker, and then we can also fill in some beautiful greenery behind him, knowing that he's outside most of the day. Now let's do a little detail. And again, I love colors of the world. Look at these. You can draw so many kinds of people, color so many different kinds of people with these beautiful, beautiful, beautiful colors. So you can give him a quick color and then give him a quick shadow here to indicate the light source. It's a sunny day, so he's got the light coming in on top of his arm. Pencil that in quick. Give him some quick color on his face. Again, reminding yourself that, yeah, that's why they wear baseball hats, to give them a little shade. You know, he's got a little shadow under his nose. Where you see these lines, that's kind of where you want to just go in underneath them and then fill in. Again, indicating oh, that's where the shadow is supposed to be. Oh, so if I put that darker line in there, it's going to make his face look 3D. How about that? And then we can go back in and let's get that gray pencil. Let's imagine he's got on kind of a blue shirt underneath. And again, look for the lines on the drawings. And it's just fun to imagine. You know, this is something you can do too, even while you're just riding the bus or sitting at lunch. Look at where the light and shadows fall on people, things. That's how you can kind of make things look 3D. I think that's really fun because, I mean, there's all kinds of ways to draw. There's no wrong way to draw. Let's give that more of a New York-y kind of blue. And I love how these crayons give texture, and it just amazes me. And look, you can just go insane. Okay, let's find a nice kind of a brown. Let's make a baseball glove. What do you say? Back in the day, they didn't have all those crazy colors. They were all kind of a brown leather. There's kind of an idea of what Mr. Reynolds would have looked like on a blue sky background. Using your Crayola products and using them all. I don't think you need to just use one. If you want to use the colored pencils, great, but crayons add a lot of great texture. And then to fill colors, boy, these guys, they can't be beat. All right, I hope you enjoyed that. I sure enjoyed showing you a little bit about baseball cards and light and shadow.
Great examples of how to add texture and fill in the spaces. Thank you so much. Now that you've seen Arigon's wonderful illustrations, it's your time to draw. Grab some crayons, watercolors and markers, and paper. Decide if you're going to draw a scene of two baseball players respectfully greeting each other, friends face off, or if you're going to create a baseball card that features a player from the past, today, or the future. While kids of all ages are busy drawing, I want to mention that parents and teachers can be the first to know about our next Crayola Art of Learning program and the many other free colorful learning experiences by signing up for the Crayola Education Monthly e-newsletter. Just check the education box when you sign up. After this session, young artists will have plenty of time to finish their work. We recommend that parents and teachers ask children about their drawings and discuss what they learned about baseball and the important players in its history, such as Charles Albert Bender and John Myers. When children have finished their art, please post a photo of it in the comment section of this video. We can't wait to see what they create. Traci, as we head into Native American Heritage Month, what suggestions do you want to share with parents and teachers to help children build appreciation for Indigenous traditions and Native Americans' contributions to this country?
Well, I am always excited when we get to Indigenous Peoples Day, and not long after that, it's Native American Heritage Month, because for those 7 weeks, we've got a spotlight on us. Definitely, you can learn about Native people all year long, and I encourage you to do so. I encourage you to read books about Native people, but some resources specifically that are very easy to access. The National Museum of the American Indian has a Native 360 knowledge website that's easily accessible. There's all kinds of videos and activities, games, things that you can learn, other art projects to do. The American Indian Library Association has a list of youth literature award winners, wonderful books, board books through books for teens that for over several year period that you can access and check out more. So if you like fiction, nonfiction in a variety of formats, including works that Arigon's contributed to, and I have as well, are listed on there. Make sure you check out your local library. If they don't have those books or videos about Native people in place, request that they buy them and have them available for everyone. PBS has a number of wonderful programs and videos that are created by Native people that you are free to watch online, and I would encourage you to do so.
Awesome resources. Thank you for sharing that. Lots of ways for us to keep learning. Arigon, in the dedication section of this book, you offer thanks to the baseball fanatics in your life, especially your mother, as well as your father, sister, grandparents, aunts, cousins, and many friends who share your love of the game. Thinking about your love of baseball, what closing comments would you like to share with our viewers?
I think what I want people to take away from Contenders is that, yes, hard work, but also community. That's a place where I live and I thrive. I mean, that kind of tells the story of who Native people are today. People are finding a lot of community in baseball. If you go to Oklahoma or really any place in the country, you'll find a lot of kids playing through that participation in Little League or school baseball teams. You'll find the Native people there and you'll find them supporting and cheering them on. Everybody gets to play, everybody's included. We get to be Native people together, just hanging out, kind of like out at powwow, only they've got baseball. And oh, as much as I love a powwow, I love the game just as much. So hopefully people will take from Contenders and from the work that I do that there's a lot of love, a lot of humor, a lot of inclusion in our Native communities. And you are welcome to join us. At a lot of these powwows, there's intertribals. You don't have to have a shawl. Just come on down and join. And the baseball, usually those community teams are free. So come on down. Maybe they'll have hot dogs and fry bread.
Thank you for that emphasis on our connection to community and then that open invitation to joining your community. Beautiful. We want to thank Traci Sorell and Arigon Starr for inspiring us today. We also want to thank Penguin Kids and Penguin Classroom for collaborating with us on the Art of Learning program. And we want to share a special thank you for everyone who's joined us. Remember, each of you can hit it out of the park when you honor your traditions and treat every player with respect.
Donada, goha'i, till we see each other again.
Mado and Kapichihi, thank you in Muskogee Creek. Thank you in Kickapoo. I am so glad to be here. Thank you.
Thank you. Bye-bye.